it is generated through safety and efficiency gain. So what about here? For every dollar spent on mandatory pilotage in Argentina, does your country benefit from anything like a 60-to-1 return today? Well-regulated pilotage is not a cost burden. It's not a cost burden. It is an investment. It is a commitment to the safety of navigation and the protection of the environment. And it is an enabler of efficiency, efficient maritime trade, and economic prosperity. That's what it is. Sadly, Argentina's system of pilotage is not delivering the performance that is standard in virtually in all other countries. The rate of collision and grounding incidents per port of call in Argentina between 1999 and 2018 for ships under pilotage is 42 times higher than the international average. At the same time, pilotage fees have risen disproportionately. Ship owners and operators are paying more than they should. This increase is the result of profit maximizing behavior among competing service providers. Higher costs, worse safety. That is the record of competition in Argentina seen by everybody else. This is not how things have to be. And it is not because individual pilots are less capable than anywhere else on the planet. The pilots in Argentina are very good pilots. The problem is they work in a system that distorts the way they work compared to others. And I'm sure many of you here know what I'm talking about. My understanding is that key indicators demonstrate your country's economic performance is improving. I assume this can only be achieved by having the perceptiveness to distinguish what works from what doesn't work in any sector of activity, and having the determination to implement that works best, what works best. Deregulation and competition are assumed to mean getting the same service or better service at a lower cost. In many sectors, that promise holds, but in pilotage, it does not. And the reasons are structural. Mandatory pilotage areas have characteristics which align with the natural monopoly. Same as firefighter. Who would think to put firefighter station in competition to extinguish fires in Buenos Aires? That would be stupid. Who would think to have 3 air traffic control towers competing to each other, trying to get planes for their business to land? That would also be stupid. So why people don't see it the same way for pilotage services for your country? So when pilotage service providers compete for acts of pilotage, each provider must recover its full cost for a divided market. This leads to cost-cutting behaviors, and at the same time, systemic inflationary pressure on the overall cost of the system. Cost-cutting tends to diminish investment in training, first thing. In turn, this makes collision, grounding, and disruption to trade more likely. Cost-cutting would then reduce investment in technology and techniques, preventing the efficiency benefits of pilotage from being fully realized. Over time, this diminishes a port or a country's competitive position. Taken together, this cost-cutting strikes public benefit from the safety of navigation or efficiency. Another consequence is the pilotage becomes a discriminatory service. This means it is provided only where profit can be maximized, not provided where it is needed. The result is market failure due to the under-provision of safe, non-discriminatory, and efficient pilotage services. And the government then has to intervene to correct the default again and over again, because the root of the problem is this dogma that pilotage works best in competition environment. So instead of having the government intervene every 5 years to correct things, why not make one law, one regulation for one time that works all the time? The KPMG, as KPMG found in 2018 study commissioned by an administration, competition in pilotage produces greater negative impacts than monopoly. Wow. Single provider delivery is not merely more efficient, it is the only model consistent with maintaining the standards the public interest requires. This is not a matter of my personal belief or preference. It is the reason why the pilotage systems of virtually every country on the planet are set up this way. So, introduce competition in a service best suited to a natural monopoly, and the benefit-cost ratio of 60:1 I mentioned earlier takes a very serious hit. Competition exposes pilots to commercial pressure. It is fundamental that pilots are empowered to work independently without outside influence. When pilots compete for work, they face pressure to do things they would otherwise refuse to do. Their judgment, that's what the public is relying on, your judgment, then become compromised. The CMA-CGM Centaurus collision with expensive port infrastructure in Jebel Ali in Dubai illustrates exactly what happens when pilots' independence is compromised. The consequences are costly. The 60:1 ratio of benefits versus cost just took a big hit there. So what other jurisdictions tell us about competition and deregulation? Florida, for example. Florida in the United States. Probably the free market kingdom of the world. United States, they believe so much in free market, right? So in Florida, after briefly experimenting with competition in the 1980s, Florida passed legislation explicitly abolishing it. Their conclusion was definitive, and I quote, "There is a significant conflict of interest between a vessel's owner economic need and the public interest in safe passage. It is in the public's best interest for the pilot's judgment to be absolutely free of economic consideration to the ship owner when piloting his vessel. If pilots must compete against one another to win assignments, there is a likelihood that a pilot will compromise safety considerations in order to accommodate the financial interest of the ship owner. For in so doing, he will have a competitive edge over another pilot," unquote. So after these findings, Florida made a new pilotage law And the first paragraph states this, and I quote, "Piloting is an essential service of such paramount importance that its continued existence must be secured by the state and may not be left open to market forces. Because safety is the primary objective of the regulation of pilotage by the state, and because of the significant economies of scale in delivering the service, the requirement of a large capital investment in order to provide required service, and the fact that pilots are supplying services that are considered to be essential to the economy and the public welfare, it is determined that economic regulation rather than competition in the marketplace will better serve to protect the public health, safety, and welfare," unquote. So now that's the new Pilotage Act in Florida. Alaska, another beautiful American state. Following the New Amsterdam grounding in 1997, and taking on board the findings of the National Transport Safety Board after the Exxon Valdez disaster, Alaska abolished competition. What's happening in the European Union? In the EU recognized from the outset that competition and pilotage do not mix. So pilotage was explicitly kept out the competition provisions of the EU Port Services Regulation. Everything is competition in the ports in Europe, except competitions, and the EU Parliament endorsed that. There's a few places that they have competition. Australia. In Australia, competition from pilotage mandates led to underinvestment in training and increasing in maritime safety incident in Queensland. Denmark, since it's a funny story, because the day that the competition was introduced, it was the 8th November 2008 at midnight, and I was there in Copenhagen. So I talked with pilots the next morning, and the phone stopped ringing. Agents were looking for cheaper alternatives. I lived through that, and it's a sad sight. But anyway, the government introduced competition in Denmark. The old pilotage system since declined by 9%. The efficiency declined by 9%. And this is the numbers from the Danish government themselves. Prices went up by 125%. Again, numbers from the Danish government too. So why doing this? Efficiency goes down, price goes up, safety so-so. So what's the point? To please ship owners? Ship owners are foreign money coming to your country. Why don't accept it and say thank you? So I continue in Denmark. There are now insufficient pilots to meet demand at the entrance of the Baltic and some smaller port because they are private, they are in business.